let's be honest, even before that, we never really fucking had money. But now we really didn't have money because my sister was literally relearning life, completely relearning life. She was not able to support us financially, obviously. I'm the only Canadian in this conservatory, and I have no money to get myself through my education. This would be a good time for me to remember that God exists, but it definitely wasn't. This was the time that I remembered that I was the one that needed to pick myself up, show myself I could do it, and do it for my family. And that's exactly what we did. That's how I learned to grow. I learned, pick yourself up, fuck your excuses, and make it happen. That's how I learned. And so, a week after my sister's injury, my mom told me to go back to school. And so I did. And this is when we started to talk to the dean about different financial opportunities. I was having my teachers writing letters about why I was a valuable player in school. Different grants came in, not enough, but enough to keep me going. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Spiritual Debate Podcast, episode uno. I only speak English, so that's basically all I've got. My name is Victoria Pipo, but most people call me V. So if I am your best friend today, feel free to call me V. But if you continue to listen to the podcast and you hate me tomorrow, call my last name Pippo and call me Victoria. And that'll be just fine by me. I'm super excited to welcome you into this space. It's interesting, I think about how beautiful God is in these moments, because I had this dream of having my own space, speaking to an audience of people, moving people with word ever since I was a young girl. And it's pretty fucking wild to think that this moment marks that dream come true in a way that I could have honestly never seen in manifestation in this form. And so know that as you're watching today or listening today, you're also listening to my inner girl squealing in pure excitement. You're seeing my inner teenager who is an actor who moved away when she was 15 years old to a private boarding arts school, feeling like she's made it. You're also talking to the 21-year-old Disney princess who booked a Disney cruise ship right out of the gate of college, who then definitely felt like she was at her peak. And you're talking to the, right now, 30-year-old woman who made another dream come true in a completely different way than every way that she thought it was going to be. And so thank you for being here. I'm excited to dive in, but I really wanted to start the Spiritual Debate Podcast with my heart. And so I'm going to take you along my origin story, and I'm going to try to leave out as much unnecessary parts. But I also want you to get a window into who I am and what brought me to build the Spiritual Debate Podcast, but also what anchors some of the stances that you're going to see me speak about here as we move forward together. So, as we begin here, I want to start at my childhood. Ever since I was a young girl, very, very young girl, I always wanted to be an actor. It was the dream, not a dream, it was the dream. When I was around 7 years old, my mom put me into performance. I was in love with acting, with being on stage. My mom has the funniest memory of me in our small Leamington, Ontario, tomato capital of Canada playing this little spider in Charlotte's Web. My mom has this video of me on the side of the stage while all the lead characters are talking, and I've got my hands mocking them. If you're watching the video, I'm like mocking the leads on stage. And I don't know if this is when my mom realized I was a star or I was definitely some breed of unique, but either way, here we are. I fell in love with performance, and it never left me. So my mom put me into our small tomato theater in Leamington, Ontario, and I pursued acting. Moved away when I was 14, 15 years old to Interlochen Arts Academy. I was accepted, if you know, you know, to this amazing acting academy in Traverse City, Michigan. And I moved away to pursue acting. I was among, honestly, at that time of my life, I was among some of the most unbelievable artists and creatives and weirdos like me. I think that was probably one of the first times I actually felt like I belonged in the world. Otherwise, I always felt quite unusual in comparison to other people, always having the dream, always wanting to be something different than my upbringing, always feeling like I was here to do something different than the way that it had been created before my lineage, and not really understanding why until I went to Interlochen. And I was among great performers, immersed among young children whose parents were absolutely either obsessed or completely, choiceless maybe in throwing their children into this education program. And so spent 2 years at Interlochen, studied among the greats, but also was taught from a very young age at this time. When kids are, stealing Pombeys from their mother's fridge, I was playing, Amelia in Othello and Nina in Chekhov. I was in The Seagull. I was playing these extraordinary women, always ahead of time. Anita in West Side Story, like these were the types of women that I was portraying in my life. And being that my childhood had a lot of divorce and separation and struggle, I really found myself finding healing in these characters, escapism in these characters as well, but a lot of healing because they had a story where they were heroes. They had stories where they were empowered women. They had stories where there was love that stayed, love that was passionate, love that was honest. And I didn't have examples of that in my life, ever, until my now husband, but we'll talk about that later. And so I graduated from Interlochen Arts Academy and I was accepted to Baldwin Wallace Conservatory. This was a 4-year Bachelor of Music program, and I got to study musical theater. My teacher, I'll never forget her, she called me the edgy, deep chick. That was my role in life. Every single student in my conservatory that was a part of my class, they all had a different type. We were like boxed into a certain character, and if you've ever been a part of a rigorous conservatory in musical theater, you understand, like, you're playing that role. And up until this point, I'd been playing all of these extraordinarily powerful women. And that ended up being my corner of my performance career. I now spent 4 years in this education program, studying, learning, performing, ballet, tap, modern jazz, you name it, was doing film, was also, being in my class, learning, growing, becoming a brand, really. And that brand was the edgy, deep chick. I remember telling my teacher that I wanted to be funny. And I remember her telling me that I'm not the funny person, even though I am honestly the funniest fucking person I've ever met. But in that moment, I realized that I wasn't ever going to be able to be myself. I was going to be able to play these women that embodied how I looked, that I embodied a certain archetype or essence of, and that was going to be my brand. And so, around this time, there were a lot of things that was happening in my family that had always been there, but had kind of reached a culmination point. And at this time in my life, I didn't have a God. I certainly didn't have my spiritual awakening. I definitely didn't have any financial understanding or literacy or really education. And both of my parents lost their jobs. So my mother and my stepfather lost their job around the same time as my sister and I were on vacation. And she fell off a golf cart and suffered from a catastrophic brain injury while her and I were on vacation. And I'm halfway through my college education. I mean, let's be honest, even before that, we never really fucking had money. But now we really didn't have money because my sister was literally relearning life, completely relearning life. She was not able to support us financially. obviously. Both my mother and my stepfather were the sole providers of my education. I'm the only Canadian in this conservatory, and I have no money to get myself through my education. This would be a good time for me to remember that God exists, but it definitely wasn't. This was the time that I remembered that I was the one that needed to pick myself up, show myself I could do it, and do it for my family. And that's exactly what we did. That's how I learned to grow. I learned, pick yourself up, fuck your excuses, and make it happen. That's how I learned. And so, a week after my sister's injury, my mom told me to go back to school. And so I did. And this is when we started to talk to the dean about different financial opportunities. I was having my teachers writing letters about why I was a valuable player in school, why I needed to be a part of the program. And little by little, different grants came in, not enough, but enough to keep me going. There were different parts of my education that I couldn't afford, and my teachers were kind of letting it slide by. The financial team was letting it slide by. And like I said, this would have been a good time to remember that God existed, but I didn't. But now I can see that it was God's hand that I was able to graduate with my class. I think there was like 17, 18 of us. It's a small group of people. I was able to walk with my classmates like I fit in while I had about $70,000 that I owed my college education that we didn't pay a frickin' lick of, but they set a deal with us that we'd be able to pay it essentially when we could, and that they'd continue to let me finish my education. And so that moment for me, of all of the things that had happened with my family financially, my sister's accident, both my parents losing their jobs, all of these moments of like fighting to belong, feeling like my teachers, they saw my talent, but they were also like, but stay in this corner. And I was like, I want to fly. And they were like, right, but like in this corner. It brought a lot of good for who I am today, but I also think that it led to some of the more challenging experiences I had as my spiritual awakening began. Right out of the gate of college, I was blessed to say that I had 17 agent offers right out of the gate of college. I booked with an agent and a manager, and I moved to New York City. Still broke. But now, at least it was justified, because everybody in New York City, you're either really fucking rich or really trying to make a dream work and you've got nothing. So I happen to be obviously the latter, but I was on a 1-year visa and I was going to make it. I really felt like I was going to make it to the dream. And the dream was Broadway, has been ever since I was a little shrimp. I wonder, I never actually explored that part of my past lives. I'd be curious to know, like, why was that always in me? Like, what was that driver? I assume that children who have excelling abilities from a very young age usually have some sort of past life connection. So anyways, right out of the gate of college, I started to audition in New York City, and I booked a rock tour and a Disney cruise ship contract simultaneously within 5 auditions in New York City. And that felt in my life like I had been handed a reward for all of my hard work. And so it was like, do I go on a rock tour with a 1-year visa and then be like technically fucked after that? Because once the, rock tour is complete, it's not really building any reputation. Or do I go with something like Disney, which I knew was a company and a corporation that would continue to build reputation? It had merit, it had understanding, it had visibility. And so I ultimately ended up accepting this opportunity to portray Elsa in their main stage shows for a Disney contract. First time I ever made my own money as a professional actor. First time, being contracted to maintain a certain level of strength vocally, stamina-wise, in terms of resilience, playing Elsa pretty much, I think it was like 4 shows for 2 days or something like that. It was a lot. It's a lot of letting it go, especially when you're rocking on a cruise ship. and you're playing a bunch of other roles. But yeah, I did that. And so I ultimately ended up accepting this contract with Disney, and it was a great contract. I was in a very unhealthy relationship at the time with somebody who was very unfaithful to me, who lived in New York City. I met him in New York City, and found out that he had had multiple girlfriends. And the irony again, like this should have been the time where I met God, right? Like it would make sense that I'm singing Let It Go every single night, and then I'm also, texting my narcissistic partner back in New York City who's 10 years older than me, who's been fucking cheating on me the entire time. But I can't let him go because he's, doing that whole narcissist entangles and infiltrates the empath. But I didn't let him go. And I finished my contract with Disney. I thought we were getting married, me and this guy that I absolutely despised, but I was hoping he would get me a visa. And he left me pretty much right after I got off the cruise ship. So I'd wasted all of this time when I could have gotten married to some sexy European man, could have made love under the Disney lights, and yet I'm with this fucking loser from New York City. Rats. Just fucking embarrassing. So he left me, and I had to move home. That definitely felt like one of the biggest straws that broke the camel's back. I mean, have you ever had a dream so big you gave everything? And not only that, but there were people who were counting on you. My entire life, I have felt like my family was counting on me to be something better than the life that I grew up in. I was the kid who went to yard sales to go pick up $5 Parasuco shirts and Abercrombie and Fitch shirts from the rich kids who got rid of them because I got new ones just so I could feel like I fit in. I was the kid whose parents got separated and remarried 3 times each before I was 7 years old. I knew nothing about love. I knew nothing about connection. I was a person who had a dream, but had all the odds stacked against them. No money. None. No one around me that I could rely on. Just people siphoning and living vicariously through me and telling me to fly and hoping that I get there so maybe we can all feel better about the bad hand of life we had been dealt. And so when my visa ran out and my relationship ended, that I had put a lot of my obvious attachment to New York and the dream into, and I had to move home, that felt like death to me. And I would say that around this time, I would call this this is like my warm-up awakening. This is like now you're going to learn who Abraham Hicks is and understand the law of attraction. Like, is it awakening? Yeah. I think you go through many, but this was definitely the one that started to make me curious about my mindset, curious about who I am, curious about how to create. And so I moved back home to Toronto, Ontario, Canada at the time. And I started to work at a gym, which felt like death. But I actually, if you know Equinox is a really great, they call it a club. It's not a gym, okay? It's a club. It's a club. It's a club. But it's not a gym. It's like $230 a month. And I was like one of the top salespeople in the entire clubs, of all the clubs around the world. I made it to like the top salesperson in my first month. Why? Because I told them all I was going back to Disney and that I didn't fucking care if they got the gym membership. Would you like to see pictures of me playing Elsa? I'd be happy to. And that's exactly what I did. And so I ended up being one of the top salespeople. All the while I was hoping that I'd get another opportunity to go back to Disney. And about 6 months after I did, I got an opportunity to be on a different cruise ship to portray Mary Poppins. And I mean, Mary Poppins is badass. She's not Elsa. And I was grieving not booking Elsa again, to be completely frank with you. But the company had, selected somebody else to play Elsa. That was the first time in my career I'd ever experienced something like that. Shame, not being chosen. Oh my God, death. But actually, it did kind of feel like that for me because I actually had never experienced that before. I was either like an understudy and I was okay with it, And that was like once in a blue moon because the girl was like older than me. I'd usually always experienced the lead roles ever since I was really old enough to be a lead. And so that was kind of painstakingly sad for me, actually. But it was healing because I remember on the last day on that cruise ship, the girl who played Elsa, her and I developed a really beautiful friendship. A really beautiful friendship. And I'd help her take off her Let It Go dress. And I remember after the final song she sang, she ran up to me and gave me a hug and started crying. And I started crying. And now I'm going to cry on camera. This is like the 5th time I'm going to do it. But it was really beautiful because I had healed something in me. Like it was like, I'm enough even if I'm not the lead, you know? I'm enough even if, you know, in that contract I had my spiritual awakening, which I'll get to shortly. But even if, you know, my parents are going to see that I'm not going to fulfill what I thought I was going to do, like I'm enough, it's going to be okay. And that was a really special moment. But anyways, I digress. I got on that cruise ship contract. And at the time, I don't know what my issue is. I think, you know what my issue was? I'll tell you. I was so afraid to let go of the people that I was dating that were going to be long distance relationships because it was easier to entangle myself in them than it was to actually like let them go, knowing that I would never be faithful with all these European men on a cruise ship. Like I couldn't acknowledge the fact that I wanted to be free. So I kept myself from having to say goodbye because it was easier to say goodbye because I fucked up than it was to say goodbye because I actually wanted to say goodbye. So anyways, I was in a summer fling, got on the Disney cruise ship. He was still my boyfriend living in Toronto. And probably within my first week, I was unfaithful to him. And you know what's interesting about it? Of all the shit that I've walked through in my life, that was not even my most iconic moment. Like that is the most vanilla thing. I had a relationship and then I cheated and then that led me to my awakening. But it really was, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Why? Well, that was the first healthy-ish relationship I had had. He was a good person. And I was really confused. And I was chasing my entire life, running away. My parents' health declining, running away. My sister falling off a fucking golf cart, running away. We're financially broke, running away. Nobody in my town understands who I am, running away. My entire life was about running away. And this person, when I ran away from them into the arms of this Portuguese man, hottest Portuguese man though, God really, he brought the ribeye. Like the $200 ribeye in front of me. So I was like, it has to be this time. God was like, this is the time you're going to wake up. And so I did. And I made a really poor decision. But it was the thing that made me start to question myself. Why am I running away? Why am I harming people? Why am I harming myself? How long have I actually not wanted to perform anymore in this way? And wanted to be funny, and wanted to be Victoria, and wanted to be known for something more than just, you're this type, and this is the way you're always going to be, and you're always going to be a starving actor, living, you know, this really small existence that you think is fulfilling a dream, and you just hope that one day you're going to have enough money so that your mom can be proud of you, and all the sacrifices that she made. And then maybe one day, your father would love you enough to appreciate you before you win something. This person in my life, when I got on the cruise ship that I cheated on, he was the catalyst to make me start to question myself and to finally look to my actions and start to change them. Because I wanted to finally. I wanted to be better for myself instead of being better in the hopes that I would also make my family feel better. And honestly, make the life that I feel like I grew up in, that I didn't feel like I belonged in, feel better. And so this led me to meditation. Meditation felt like the painless thing that I could do in between shows that would allow me to start to create some distance between myself and my reactions in the world. And that's exactly what it did. at first. I meditated every day. I'd listen to guided meditations, and then I started to listen to podcasts, and I'd play Mary Poppins by night. And then during the day, I'd listen to podcasts and walk around deck 4 on the ship and enjoy the sunrise and connect with some of the crew members. And I liked that life because something started to happen in me. I felt like for the first time in my life, I softened. I was more receptive. I wasn't so hard, like I needed to prove that I was good enough. I actually just felt like peace for the first time ever. Like I wasn't running away from something, but maybe I was starting to run towards something. My meditation started to get really deep, like the kind of deep that at the time, being on a cruise ship, not having Wi-Fi to learn about it, I didn't have any understanding of like how tarot readers worked or like what oracle cards were or what astrology meant or the big names in the spiritual industry. Like I didn't have any of that access. I had meditation. So I got so deep, I didn't realize that I was starting to open up my natural clair abilities. All of them. I would have such vivid images. I would go everywhere the guide was telling me in the meditations. It's clear as day. And then one day, after really deep practices where I started to feel things, like I would get this breath of air on the left side of my body that started to come in meditations. And I didn't know what it was because, again, like I said, I didn't have any resources. I actually think it's really good to be under-resourced because we do better when we just allow things to happen naturally. And that's what I was experiencing, natural psychic development. This breath of air kept following me on the left side of my body until one day, a voice came through and said, I am your grandfather. I am your spirit guide, and I've been with you your whole life. Just like that. And then I got this scent of campfire in my nose. Like it felt like if you and I were having s'mores, chilling in the middle of like BC air. That's what it felt like. I could smell it. It was like so tangible. The fire, it felt like I was having a camping weekend with my peeps. What the is that? And so I knew that this was my mother's father, mainly because my father's father is still alive. And so I ran upstairs and I called my mother with the Wi-Fi that I had. And I said, Mom, did I ever tell you as a child that I talked to Grandpa? And she said, oh yeah, you would always walk around the house 2-3 years old and say, Grandpa's here, Grandpa's here. And at this point, my mouth is like I could catch a fish in my fucking mouth. Like my mouth was so wide. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? She says, you always walk around the house and say, Grandpa's here, Grandpa's here. And I said, did I ever say he lived on one side of my body or another? Because now I'm trying to put together that piece of that breath on the left side of my body. And she said, oh yeah, he's always pointing. You're always pointing to the left side of someone's body and say, he's there. And I said, okay, this is my final question. This is going to be my toughest one. Do you have any, recollection, perhaps, of, campfire? Like, why I would smell campfire? And she started crying. And she said, that is my fondest memory of my father. He passed when my mom was 12, I believe. And that was their fondest memory. They'd go camping every year. That was my paradigm shift moment with spirit. Happened at the end of 2019 and changed everything for me. Because I finished my cruise ship contract with an understanding that I was communicating with the spirit world. At that time, that of course led me down to more curiosity about him. And so I started to get little words that would come through like healer. You're meant to help heal. Okay? You're here to help. Okay, interesting. That's interesting. And I started to feel more called to coach people on the ship or talk to people about, spirituality and positive mindset. Like I started to get into a little bit more of that coaching role, that healer role, if you will. And so I got off the cruise ship the day the world shut down for COVID. The day, March 14th, 2020. And I remember having started to develop a little relationship with my grandfather, trying to call him in and talk to him a little bit with like I said, the limited resources I had. I had a feeling that my work was going to begin when I got off the cruise ship. And the thing is we were not really like hoarding toilet paper like you guys were in the world. Like I didn't have the same sort of introduction into COVID with the mainstream news and with social media. And, we took temperatures, like they took our temperature before the shows and we were like, this is weird. I don't really know what this is, but we weren't immersed. But I had this feeling. And my grandfather telling me I was a healer, this guiding light that felt like it was starting to, connect with other people that I was naturally called to do. And this feeling that whatever was happening in the world was, one, absolute propaganda and bullshit. But two, it was spreading fear. And I knew I didn't hold that frequency. And then the final part was that I knew it was all going to begin when I got off the cruise ship. When I got off the cruise ship and the world shut down, I knew that's when it was really going to get real. I went from being completely under-resourced, developing all of my clair abilities, my connection with the spirit world, independent of anybody, to then getting off the cruise ship. In the middle of that, my family telling me, you can't, stay with us unless you're going to wear a mask. And I was like, you're on blow. Like, you've got to be on something. Like, what drug are we taking? Because that's not going to happen. To then me isolating completely from my parents and staying on my own and now having all the information about spirituality in the world. I became obsessive in the same way that I was obsessed with being an actor, in the same way I was obsessive about wanting to belong, feeling good enough, running away. Now I was starting to run towards all of the spirituality of the new age world that was around me. I started to see all the spiritual gurus and that they were all channeling the Arcturians. I started to see how people were talking to extraterrestrial life forms or archangels. I had more access to information about astrology and tarot and oracle cards, and I just ate it all of it, you name it. Astral traveling, done it. Remote viewing, did it. Talked to galactic beings on their motherships, yes. Blue Avians, Arcturians, Andromedans, you name it. The Galactic Federation, did it, done it. Like old news. Learned all about astrology, began to really deepen my understanding of tarot and oracle. And then through my connection with my grandfather and these different ETs I was talking to, literally for hours daily, from that point, I was like, I'm an energy healer. I totally think I can do this energy healing thing, but I am not going to do Reiki because that is giving me weird vibes. It always gave me weird vibes. It felt limiting. It felt small. It felt like I was giving some sort of my power away, and it didn't feel resonant for me. And so I reached out to people on social media and was like, I'm an energy healer, what I do? Even though I wasn't really an energy healer at the time, at least not in my perspective now, 2020 version of me totally thought I was an energy healer. And I built a 6-figure business in my first year being an energy healer, pulling tarot cards for people, delivering them messages, starting to see into what's going on in people's energies, being able to help them with different, emotional blocks, mental blocks, feelings, challenges in their life, and help people grow in a very superficial level, but it was still a very beautiful experience because I was actually helping people. I was watching myself help people through being able to interdimensionally connect with them through my own meditation, to be able to hear my grandfather and have these ETs I was working with, all this resource, right? There's so much to know about 5D and ascension and DNA and activations and this being and this origin and this starseed and this past life. It was all there. And this was my path until 2022. And this is really where the turning point comes in. And I encourage anybody who's listening to this to just trust in the words that I say. and trust in what doesn't feel right for you to receive yet. But things do get quite dark. And I do think, well, I know what I know. And I believe that it's important that on this platform, I'm 100% honest about the shit that happens that people are not talking about in the spiritual world. And for me, it was very demonic. So end of 2022, let's backpedal a little bit. Middle, I would say, of 2022, I now had a 7-figure business. I was an energy healer. I was offering multitudes of different things, masterminds, group programs about money, different things about spirituality and spiritual development, 5D, 3D, 4D, channeling. But I started to wake up in the middle of the night with this feeling that I was being choked by something. Every night. And I can't tell you if something like 100% specifically happened that changed everything other than a relocation that I made with my partner. We moved back to Ontario. We were living out in BC. We moved back home for a little bit. Like, that was the only thing that actually really changed. Otherwise, I thought I was on cloud 9. But I started to wake up in the middle of the night and felt like I was being choked by something. Consistently. Didn't matter if it was the moon cycle, the veil was thin. That didn't matter. I was waking up for months like that. Wake up and feel like, I swear, like I thought somebody had just placed their hands around my neck. And I thought it was a nightmare. Because nobody in the spiritual community was talking about the dark side of waking up and being open. Nobody. And that barreled into some other things, like my health. I started to get really, really bad panic attacks. The kind where like I couldn't really like leave my house or eat inside or be on live without like really, really, really bad panic. My back, I have had chronic back issues. Show surprise, lower back manifests as not feeling supported. And when I got to New York City, my back blew out. Well, surprise. You know, the shoe fits. So I've had chronic back issues for a little over 10 years now. But it got so bad I couldn't even walk. But again, I thought, nightmare, these things happen. Like, that's really where my brain went. Like, again, nobody was talking about this shit. But then when the suicidal thoughts started to come in, and I was now 2 years into a relationship with my soon-to-be husband, the healthiest and happiest I had ever been in my life. Building $1 million business, first woman in my lineage to make money like that. With an amazing partner. We had the cutest dog. We traveled the world. Like, there was no reason why I would be telling myself I wanted to kill myself regularly. But I was. And it was the suicidal ideation that did it for me. That made me realize that something was going on in my energy. I could feel it, but I had no frame of reference to talk about it. Nowhere. Because if I looked to the spiritual community, I was low vibe. If I looked to the spiritual community, I was being gaslit by not ascending high enough. Nobody was talking about nefarious, evil, dangerous, risk, emergency work. This was not stuff people were talking about because that's spreading fear. All that obsession of waking up and opening up and getting to these highs, experiencing these highs. I was doing the same shit I was doing that as a performer. I just put it into my spiritual awakening. And this led me to what I would have found out soon after that was multiple evil, nefarious attachments latched to my energy field. Multiple. I found out because I had a healer that I knew. Back in Toronto days, one of my friends that I worked with at the gym, she gave me this girl's card. And she said, go get a tarot reading from her. And I was like, what the fuck is tarot? I'm not going to go see some chick across the street, like big glow up sign, like on top of a pet store, like not happening. And so I kept her card for multiple months and was like, I'm not going. And then one day I was like, why not? And I loved this woman when I met her instantly. It was like, zoom, who are you? Yeah. But I hadn't talked to her in many years when all of this happened. And she was the only person my spirit was guided to. And I remember reaching out to her and I said, hey, I think something's off in my energy. And she said, oh, yep, I think you're right. This would be the definition of what my second awakening would be. Like the big, big awakening that came after the high of the first awakening. The spiritual ball dropping, if you will. My balls dropped to hell, okay? Because I thought I was on the path. I thought I was doing everything right. These were natural gifts and abilities. You don't need protection. You don't need boundaries. You just need to open up. We're all open. We're all going to 5D. We're all star seeds. We're all here remembering who we truly came here to be. There's no risk. Risk is low vibe. Don't you dare do that. To then finding out that my actions of being open and open and open and open, my actions of being unguarded, unprotected, not being responsible, not being resilient with my own energy, not developing my own capacity, not respecting my own vibration, gave me absolutely no discernment. None. Zero. Zilch. Didn't need to read the room because everything was all one. What do you mean? Why would I need to read the room? Everybody's heaven if there's no hell. This led me to suicidal ideation for multiple months, being attacked by multiple nefarious attachments, and nearly destroying my health. There is no way after something like that you can awaken the same again. And I saw everything I was for what it is. And I saw everything in the spiritual community for exactly what it was as well. Performance. Highs. Not enough integration. Very rare to find true embodiment in this work. No structure, no boundary, no respect, reverence, depth for this work. They're like needles in a haystack to find these kinds of people. Everyone's too busy getting DNA activations every single full moon to recognize that maybe if you were naturally meant to be activated, it would have already happened. Everybody's so busy getting these Kundalini sessions, nobody's realizing how detrimental it can be when you try to activate something that is sleeping in your own energy. It's not natural. People aren't questioning how often scrolling on social media and how many different vibrations create leakages and bleed-throughs in your vibration because everyone's too busy being too high vibe to discern. Fast forward to 3 years later, 2025, or whenever you receive this. I now destroy, remove, disconnect the very things that were attached to me. And I do it with God. I don't believe I ever had God until this moment. Like, I did not understand God. Do I believe his hand was always in my life? Of course. Do I believe that I recognized it until this point? No, because I got saved. I got saved. And I needed emergency work to save my relationship, my health, my natural path, my true soul presence, why I came here. And it took this moment for everything to shift for me. And 3 years later, this is exactly what I do for other people. I'm a global energy healer who teaches people how to be able to stay on their natural path of life. Natural growth, natural development, natural connection with your soul presence. In order to do that, first, we've got to clear this interference. These karmic loops that are keeping you in reincarnation traps, that are keeping you in negative and evil manifestations once and again. We got to set your soul free before we ever know what the true path is. So I work as an energy healer to remove that interference, and then I keep you on your natural path of life by removing all these unnecessary things that people are just obsessed with. I'm very passionate about keeping pure-hearted, well-intended starseeds, light workers, entrepreneurs, healers on the path, their organic path, the path that God assigned them to help this world in purity, in strength, in accuracy. More than ever before, this is the work that's needed. Keeping the people who are meant to stay narrow and true, narrow and true. And now this is what I do. In the next episode, I want to walk you through a little bit of what my main stances are and really the types of starseeds, healers, entrepreneurs, scientists, medicine men, women, leaders, spiritual leaders, revolutionaries that I want to have on this podcast that are deeply embodied in their stance to come forward into this episode, into the episodes that are coming in the future, to debate and challenge and fortify our embodiment. I want to talk to you a little bit about what I'm looking for and the types of people that I want to have on this podcast. But I want this to feel like something where you feel safe to be able to bring who you desire to see me debate with, who you desire to see challenged in their integrity, in their truths. Because what I've realized is the issue that I'm seeing is not necessarily that we don't have the truth. It's just we've stopped discerning what the truth actually is. I think all the information is here at this point. It's just there's so much information, but we don't have the discernment. And so this podcast is about helping us discern what that ultimate truth is by challenging the truths that are already in place with these different embodied leaders. And so you'll find that in the next episode, I want to go a little bit deeper into this. But I want this to feel like a collaborative space. I want to bring the best possible guests I can, the greatest spiritual leaders of our time, into this room, into this studio to debate with me so we can decide together. Are they in integrity? Am I in integrity? Are you in integrity? What does that actually mean? And so, if you've made it this far, this is episode 1. This is my origin story. And my reawakening was everything that led me to build this spiritual debate podcast. And I'm humbled once and again and once and again and once and again about how good God is, how good his hand is, how good his timing is, how good his graciousness is. Because there have been times where I've been like, I don't know, should I say fuck you or thank you? Like so many moments of my life where I'm like, I'm so frustrated with why me, why this, blah, blah. But he has always turned the water to wine. And the Spiritual Debate podcast is the wine. So thank you for being here. Thank you for fucking with me. I'm excited to see you and continue this journey with you of not just awakening, but truly, actually challenging the narratives in the spiritual mainstream community so we can find what does embodiment look like in these times. See you again.